We're in episode 3 of Build in Public, and in this episode, I'm going to share with you the next steps on setting up my project, ClickUp to Sheets. If you don't know this already, if you haven't watched the first episode, I'm a ClickUp verified consultant, and I help companies and agencies through consulting services, coaching, and training courses on ClickUp. And I've recently decided to add another offer around ClickUp, and it's going to be software. The first software I'm going to build around ClickUp is called ClickUp to Sheets. And this software is about letting you sync your ClickUp tasks with Google Sheets. I'm going to share with you today how I've set up tracking my project progress in ClickUp and how I've set up my AI assistant and how I've set up Figma to start working on the project. With ClickUp, I've decided to create a list called ClickUp to Sheets, and in there we have a few views that I'm going to share with you. If you don't know about product management, there's this view which is stored by milestone or epic in the product management world. If you don't know about that already, an epic is basically a set of features. It's a way to group features in a family of things that you can handle in your product. For example, here for my product, there's the actual setup of the whole software. For example, here for ClickUp to Sheets, there's the setup of that environment. In the setup, we have setting up app script, the API, Google Workspace, user data collection, these kind of things. For example, I've already set up Google Apps Script, so I can move this one to close and actually move the whole epic to maybe like in development. I've also set up the CI/CD, so I'll put this one to close as well. And I've installed my dependencies, and all I have left is to set up the API, connect my ClickUp Workspace, and collect user data if I need to. Then we have data management, and we have a bunch of features in my product, and we need rich text formatting, customize the column display, etc. Formulas, relationships, one-way sync, two-way sync. I won't go into the detail of how I build this, but basically I thought, what's every single feature that my product needs? And I've put it here. And I've added the columns you can see for the versioning. If we go into the version view here, everything is grouped by version, and I know what I have to focus on in the first version of my product, the minimum viable product. This is everything I have to focus on, and I put it in the current batch. It's my current week of work. I have to create the one-way sync, the website setup, wrap it up, the homepage of the website, etc., etc. Then we have version 1.1. I have to sync custom fields from ClickUp, manage invoices, I have subtask support. If you're working on a product in ClickUp, I recommend you using this version custom field because it lets you group things and actually get a broad picture of what your product is about. And then we have the current view, which is basically a filter on the batch that is now. It's basically the same as this view, except it gives me a Kanban-like view, and I can actually know what I have to focus on version 1.1, 1.2, etc. Same data, but I like this when I'm currently working. I know that, for example, sync my ClickUp task to Google Sheets. I can already bring it to design because I've started the design already. I'll show you the design in Figma later, actually. And I know that, for example, manual sync trigger has been designed. Choose which ClickUp list to sync have been designed. And then I know I have to work on the website homepage. This is a way for me to track the progress in a dev-like mode. If you're a developer, you know about working in this kind of like column-like statuses. I have open, design, development, review, production, and closed. I don't really need review because I'm working alone for now, but if I start to work with a developer, this will be really useful because I'll push everything to review, I'll do my testings, and if I'm happy, I'll tell them to push it to production, and they will push it to closed whenever it's closed. It's half technical what I'm describing you right here because you have to know a little bit about development and the stages you go through when you work on a product, but keep in mind this is just for me to track my product. Next thing I needed to do is research a little bit about how to develop a Google Workspace extension. And if you open Google Sheets, for example, you can see here there's a sidebar and there's a bunch of apps that you can open, like your task lists. You could add your to-do list, you can set things to close, you can open Google Maps, you can search for something in Google Maps right from wherever you are in Google, and you can add extensions. If you click that plus button, you can download a bunch of extensions from the Google Workspace Marketplace. And these extensions are free or paid, and sometimes there's a subscription. And basically it lets you facilitate your workflow in Google Sheets, Google Docs, whichever Google product. And this is what I need to build. For example, there's this one, it's called Notion in sync with Google Sheets, and it's very similar to what I'm actually doing with ClickUp. There's this one that connects your Zendesk to Google Sheets. It's actually an official one made by Google. There's a bunch of others. Obviously, you can have a look if you're interested in exploring Google Workspace applications. And very soon, there'll be one called ClickUp to Sheets. If I type ClickUp, I'll probably find one called ClickUp to Sheets. It's going to be mine. For now, there's not. Now, to build an add-on like one of those, you need to use something called AppScript. And AppScript basically has a documentation here in Google, and it tells you like how to build Google Workspace services for Google Sheets, Google Docs, and everything. Like, it's got a whole very advanced documentation. You can go through everything and understand how it works. And this is basically what I need as a resource to start working on my product, to start developing. I need to go through the overview of AppScript, or the guides of AppScript, how to use it. And I did that. What I did is that I went into the most important features, like extending Google Workspace to Google Sheets. There's a whole documentation around this, custom functions, macros, connected sheets, everything. And there's also a second documentation that I need to know about, which is Google add-ons. And it tells you how to build an add-on for Google Drive, Google Sheets, and everything. And this one is about how to build the actual add-ons. Google AppScript is about what's behind the scenes, and Google add-ons is about what's in front of you, whichever I show you that's appearing on the sidebar. And I need to know about both Google add-ons, which is this sidebar thing, and AppScript, which is the behind the scenes that's going to connect ClickUp with Google Sheets. Now, I went through these documentations and I've copied and pasted the content into my AI. I've created a project in Claude and I've added everything about AppScript, Google AppScript Starter, the ClickUp API public connection, ClickUp to Google Sheets. Next, I needed to know about the ClickUp API. ClickUp has a documentation for their API. An API is basically a service that any application provides to connect their data with anything else on the internet, any other software. ClickUp has a documentation that explains how to use the data stored in ClickUp anywhere else. And I need to know about that to be able to pull that data from ClickUp and bring it to Google Sheets. I've copied and pasted all the documentation about the ClickUp API into Claude as well. So I've took into account that whole documentation about ClickUp API. And next, I went into Claude, which is the AI I use to start my development. It's one of the best on the market right now to work on products, to work on development and programming. And I've added everything around my roadmap, how to use AppScript, the Google AppScript Starter documentation, some information about the ClickUp API, the Postman collection. It's basically all the calls that you can do to the ClickUp API, and a one-pager around my product, what ClickUp to Sheets is about, the problem, the benefits, and everything. And I basically gave knowledge to this AI, to Claude, to be able to work on my product, and it will know about what my product is about, how to use the ClickUp API, how to use AppScript, how to use Google add-ons, and how to build what I need to build. Now, for the design part, I needed to build the first version of my designs. And to do so, I used something called G Suite Add-ons UI Design Kit. This is a design kit on Figma, Figma being one of the most used software for designing. And this gives you a starting template on how to design add-ons for Google Sheets. I found this quite randomly, but it really saved me a lot of time because it's based on something called material design. So if you don't know what material design is about, it's the design system of Google. It's what Google recommends you when you're building Google products. And it saves you a lot of time. So if we get back to here, it has icons, it has basically the values of buttons and everything, and how everything should look like. And basically it tells you like how you should build your cards. And if we go right here, it tells you the anatomy of a card, what should be there. There should be a header, then there should be like a bunch of information below. And this helped me understand how to structure my add-on, how to design that add-on. And from there, because I do have some skills in Figma, I designed my add-on. I created first off a design system. The design system is basically the colors, the spaces, the borders I will use for my product. And here we have it. It's going to be around purple and a little bit of fuchsia and some emerald. And these are basically the colors I will use when I'm working on my product. It's colors very similar to the ClickUp branding. That way you know that you're talking about ClickUp. There's going to be a bunch of violet. Then there's spacing. I've basically highlighted all the spacing sizes I need. And then there's the radiuses. If I want like a small, a large radius and everything, I'll not necessarily use this one because it's recommended by Google to use certain radiuses, and I'm going to use the default design system of Google, that template I just showed you. And then shadows, not necessarily going to use it. Then we have some buttons, but what we're interested about is going to be the Google add-on components. And these are basically like all the components I need. That's my card, that's my header title, some notifications, some buttons, etc. Now that's it. So I've set up everything, and to summarize, I'm going to list it into my diagram right here. And we have some documentation for Google add-ons. We have some documentation for ClickUp. We have the AI knowledge. We have the Figma design system. And these 4 things should be enough to get me started and to get me going on building ClickUp to Sheets. Now, I've also summarized right here the progress, and I'll be sharing with you the progress this way. I think it's more visual and more interesting than just doing it in ClickUp. And if we focus on setup, for example, I can just put this one as full, and I've done the setup with Google Apps Script of the API. I still have to connect my workspace, and so I'll put these ones in green meaning it's done. And then I have to do the one-way sync between Google and ClickUp. I also have to work on the website, and in the future I have to work on data management, two-way sync, relationships, but all of these not being in my minimum viable product. That's why they're in dark gray. Everything that's in purple I basically have to work on, and everything that's in green, it's done. And this will be a little worksheet for us to see the progress and for me to track the progress and share it with you. Now that it's said, I will show you next time how I've designed based on the G Suite add-on design kit and everything that I've built right here as components, my user interface for ClickUp to Sheets. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time with a little demo of the user interface of ClickUp to Sheets.